Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to this week's World Alliance of Qara'im Torah study. I am Hakham Melech ben Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im, broadcasting to you live from Katzrin in the Golan Heights in Israel. And this week we're going to be starting on studying Leviticus chapter 22. Had a very nice and interesting Shabbat so far. I was at, the more I start talking to people here in Katzrin, and I have a sneaky suspicion it would be all over the country, although Katzrin does definitely attract some off the beaten path type of people. But the more I speak to people of Katzrin, here in Katzrin, and the more I'm open about the fact that I am a Karaite, and I reject the rabbis, and I accept the Tanach-only, and that I am part of the, or founder of the Choser B'Tanach, I guess I could say, movement, Choserim B'Tanach movement. Instead of people rejecting me or being appalled by such a situation, as I think would have been the case 10, 20, 25 years ago in Israel, I get more and more people who are kind of like, oh, I kind of think the same thing. I've thought the same thing for a long time. Now, most of these people that I've run into, their attitude is kind of like, well, I follow the rabbis anyway because that's what we're supposed to do, or that's, I'm waiting for Mashiach, or I'm waiting for the Sanhedrin to be reestablished, all this kind of stuff. But really what they're saying is, I think you're right. It's just I can't make that leap, and that's fine. I totally respect that. it's definitely a difficult leap to make when there's so much peer pressure and so much community pressure to be part of the rabbinical movement if you're dati, if you're religious here in Israel. But it's amazing because I really have people who are kind of like, I would call them like crypto Karaites. They're secretly Karaites, or they're very Karaite leaning, or they're very sympathetic towards the Karaite point of view. It's something they've kind of thought deep down for many years, many of them, and I'm Karaite. I've actually gotten quite positive responses. Was these I don't know how to explain these anything bad. Very sniveling, these sniveling a synagogue here, and I told them, or they found out I was Karaite, and have to kind of check, synagogue, or we're going to count you as part of the congregation when you come to the synagogue, and go, nerve to even think about whether I can be counted as part of the congregation or not, then you guys can take you. But that's been so far really the only negative reaction I've gotten. Other than that, really, people have been interested, fascinated, positive. They've expressed the idea that they kind of think along the same lines. They just, haven't had the guts, I guess, or haven't had the ability, the practical ability to just switch over. Maybe because they don't see an active community there. Everyone is very dependent on community. And I don't blame people for that. But yeah, that's been my experience so far. I mean, the more I come out of the closet as a Karaite, as a Choser b'Tanach, then the more overall positive reaction I seem to be getting. And I was speaking to somebody yesterday, and they said they ran into a Messianic Jewish couple, a Messianic couple, meaning believers in Jesus, and definitely I want to engage with them because I love I enjoy actually speaking to Christians and Messianics. I like to give them a hard time, and also I feel like they have although I have no affinity whatsoever towards Christianity or towards Messianic Judaism, I feel like they have also a lot of times a Tanach-only kind of approach. But that wasn't the context of this conversation. The context of the conversation was this person told me that this Messianic couple had said to him, a friend of mine at the synagogue, that this Messianic couple had said to him that they believe that, well, the reason they're promoting Christianity, or the reason they're promoting their Messianism, is that they believe that the reason so many Jews are not religious or not dati is because the massive amount of rules and laws that the rabbis installed alienates people, and so they don't want to be religious. And now that's where these messianics move in and try to attract them to their movement. Well, I agreed with them. They're actually 100% correct about that. Many people are turned off by rabbinical Judaism because it doesn't resonate with them. It doesn't intuitively make sense. And yes, and there are movements like Christianity, Messianic Judaism, all kinds of different movements that are sitting there waiting in the wings to suck these people up. And that's exactly why it's so important for us to get the word out as Karaites, especially in Israel and in the Jewish world, that there is a more authentic way. You don't have to sell your soul to Jesus / Yeshua. You don't have to follow a false religion. You don't have to become an idol worshiper just to get the rabbis out of your hair. There is another way, and it is the movement of the Choserim b'Tanach, the movement of the Karaites. So it's interesting. Things are getting interesting here in Katsarin. We'll see where it all goes. I'm taking it step by step. I'm taking it day by day, but it was very cathartic, I would say, to be able to, at this Shabbat table that I was at today, to basically say, listen, because they started talking about Karaites, and they were saying all kinds of incorrect things about Karaites. So I couldn't resist. So I finally said, listen, I'm a Karaite. I've been a Karaite for 25 years practically. Well, actually, since 2001. So 23 years, coming up on 24 years. And what you said about this, that's not correct. And I kind of set the record straight. And they said, how do you know this? I said, well, I have to tell you guys, I'm a Karaite, and I've been a Karaite for over 20 years. Okay. So at any rate, we'll see where things go. But I don't care. I have to do what I have to do. I've got to move ahead, forge ahead. I came back to Israel for a reason. I believe that Yahweh sent me up to the Golan Heights, up to the north, for a reason. One of the reasons I believed at the time of the war was to use my prayer and my calling out to the name of Yahweh, since nobody really calls out to the name of Yahweh. They call out to Hashem and Adonai and all kinds of false names. And I felt like I was the only one, or maybe one of the few up in the north, that is actually calling out to the name of Yahweh to protect the people of the north, to protect the northern border. That was what I felt I was called to do. And also to, to see if this is a good place to establish a Karaite community. And as you know, this is our intention. So in 2025, I'm going to be sending out a letter to everybody soon, or, just an announcement about some of the future plans. I really would like to take the World Alliance of Qara'im to the next level starting in 2025. I'm going to be asking everybody for money, so hide your wallets. It's really time. It's really come to a point where I feel that without funding, we're hitting a dead end. We're hitting a wall, hitting a brick wall. And the fact of the matter is that this is a critical time. I truly, truly believe in the bottom of my heart that this is a critical time for us to get the message of Chosarim B'Tanach, of Karaism, out to Israel, out to the Jewish world at large, even out to the world at large. And in order to do so, we really need funding. So it's something I've tried to avoid for many, many years, because I'm an idealist. I'm not a money person. But, ein kemach, ein Torah, as the rabbis like to say. No money, no Torah. So money, unfortunately, makes this world of 3 dimensions, space and time on this planet Earth go around. And so I'm going to get a bit more assertive. I won't use the word aggressive. That's not my style. But I'm going to get a bit more assertive about trying to raise funds for the World Alliance of Qara'im. And if anybody has any ideas, and if either you are a millionaire, well, millionaire is nothing anymore. Millionaire is small change these days. If you're a billionaire, I'll settle for a millionaire. Or somebody's a millionaire who would like to support the World Alliance of Qara'im, please be in contact with me. And if you're not a millionaire, then whatever, everybody who believes in this cause can afford a little bit, even if it's $5 a month. There's nobody here. There's nobody that can't afford it. So I'm going to become a little bit more assertive about asking for money, because I've realized that if I don't do that, then I'm shooting the whole movement in the foot. And this is a movement really that Am Yisrael, that the people of Israel really desperately, desperately need right now. Okay. So that being said, in the announcement are donation links. Please donate, but please don't do so on the Shabbat. Do so after the Shabbat. I don't know where you are in the world, okay? But let's start taking this a bit more seriously, okay? Anywho, that wasn't the point of what I wanted to say for my opening monologue. That's just the direction it went. I did want to say that things are definitely getting interesting here since I've come back to Israel. And they are definitely things are definitely heating up or warming up here in Katsrin, which is making me or making it more possible to see what directions I need to take in terms of promoting the Chosarim B'Tanach, the Karaite movement, and setting up our first community here in Israel. Okay. Other than that, what else can I say? So there haven't been any missiles here in the north as of late, because Israel made the so-called ceasefire with Hezbollah. So it's quiet, at least for now, which is nice, although I have no illusions. I have no fantasies that this is the end of it. It's just a nice break in the meantime. But ever since I came to Katsrin in August, there's always been this feeling of waiting for the sirens to go off, They can go off at any time, they can go off at 3:30 in the morning. They can go off at 6 in the morning. They can go off when you're in the shower. They can go off when you're sitting on the toilet. Hezbollah doesn't check in with us to see when is a good time for them to send missiles over the northern border. So there was always this sense of tension in the background that siren could go off at any time. And in Katsrin, we have 30 seconds to get into the protected area. And For me, that means trying to grab my two cats, which isn't always possible. Grab them by the necks, run into the protected area with them, holding them by the scruff of the neck, and hope that that the booms just go off in the sky, that the Iron Dome shut down the booms, and that they don't land anywhere in Katsarin. Well, at least for now, that situation is over. Again, I don't think this is a permanent solution. Something's going on in Syria. I have no idea what's going on in Syria. In fact, today at the synagogue, nobody seemed to know what was going on. Seriously, who are we rooting for? Are we rooting for anybody, or are we rooting for everybody? So, okay, I think I'm back. So we'll see how that develops. At any rate, it's nice to have a little bit of quiet here in Katsarin, here in the Golan Heights, and to be able to enjoy it rather than having to worry about missiles coming over the being lobbed over the mountains at any moment. Okay. All that being said, let's dig in. We have made it to Leviticus chapter 22. Let's open up our Torah. We're at the beginning of Leviticus 22. So just give me a second here to set everything up. One second, please. And just take a moment. Okay. That's Leviticus. Leviticus 22. One second. Let's open up our Robert altar. It's page 1008. Okay. Alrighty. Oh my God, it's already low battery. How the heck did that happen so quickly? All right, let me plug in. Just give me a minute here. I'm going to plug in the charger. Let me share the screen in the meantime. And I'll be right back. I just got to grab the charger, plug it in, and then we will commence with our study on Leviticus chapter 20. Okay, we are back. Welcome back to this week's World Alliance of Qara'im Torah study. Shabbat Shalom, Netanel. Shabbat Shalom. And we're digging into Leviticus chapter 22. So let me share the screen here. Leviticus chapter 22. Okay. Let me bring up the Hebrew. Oops, that's the wrong version. Okay, so we are in verse 1. So, Waidaber Yahweh El Moshe Lemor, typical opening statement, of course. Yahweh spoke to Moses to say, verse 2, Daber El Haron Wa El Banao Wa Ye Nazeru Mikad She Bnei Israel Welo Yahalalu Et Yahalalu Et Shem Kodshi Shem Makdishim Li Ani Yahweh. Okay, speak to the children of Aaron. Speak to Aaron and to his sons. Now, as soon as we see this phrase, speak to Aaron and his sons, we are now, Shalom, Yaakov Ben-Yamin. Don't think I've seen you here before. Welcome. So as soon as we see this phrase, speak to Aaron and to his sons, we are now experienced Torah interpreters. We are now experienced Torah learners. We know what that means. What does that mean, people? Speak to Aaron and his sons. Aaron is the progenitor of what? Of the Cohanim, of the priests. So we know that this Yahweh is speaking to Moses. And Moses is then to relate the information to Aaron, we know that this is going to have to do, whatever comes following this is going to have to do with the Cohanim. It's going to have to do with the service in the tabernacle / temple, or something to do with the priestly caste, caste, right? So whenever we see that, we should know already that these are going to be laws for the priests. Okay. وَإِلْ بَنَوَا يِنَزْرُوا مِقَدْشَي بَنَي Yisrael. So Yinazru, how can we translate that? To set apart, to stay apart. Let's see how Robert Alter translates that one. Let's see if there's another interesting definition. Keep apart. Okay. So we're going to learn later on when we get to the book of Numbers, we're going to learn about something called the Nazir, a Nazarite. A Nazir is usually translated as a Nazarite. A Nazir is someone who's, we're going to see, is going to separate himself from various, shall we say, pleasures, such as wine, such as cutting his hair. Shimshon, Samson was a Nazarite. And in doing so is going to almost keep a monastic kind of relationship to Yahweh. Definitely not required, but it's a possibility if someone feels they want to go in that direction, then the Torah, as we'll see when we get to the book of Numbers, gives them that opportunity. So Nazir, a Nazarite, not to be confused with someone from Nazareth who is a Notzri from Nazareth, a Nazarite. No, it's not that, a Nazarite. We'll get to that when we get to it, okay? At any rate, Yinazru Mikache ben Israel. So they should keep themselves separated. Mikache Yisrael, Mikache ben Israel, from the dedicated items of the children of Israel, okay? Sacred donations of the children of Israel. And we'll see what that means in a second. Okay, they should not profane the name of my holiness. Usually translated as my holy name, but that would really be an incorrect translation. Even Robert Alter translates it as my holy name. I mean, that's colloquially, that's the way it should be translated. But Shem Kachi, it's literally the name of my holiness. Okay, my holy name we can go with. Which they are dedicating, setting aside for me. And it's talking about, this is referring to that which they're setting aside for me, is referring to these things. The set apart things, the things dedicated or donated to Yahweh. And we'll talk about what that means in just a second. An Yahweh, I am Yahweh. Remember, we spoke about this being part of what the secular biblical scholars call the holiness code. And even though they are incorrect in their belief that this holiness code is imported into the Torah from a separate source, that doesn't mean that they haven't picked up on something correct, which is we do see throughout these chapters, holiness code is usually set aside or set apart. His mukdash as chapter 17 through 26 of Leviticus, meaning chapter 17 through the end of Leviticus, or almost the end of Leviticus. And we see a number of recurring themes there. We see the constant mention of holiness, as we're seeing here in these verses. We see the constant mention of Yahweh saying that he's holy, and therefore you should be holy, or that because you are making me holy, I make you holy. And the constant mention of Ani Yahweh, I am Yahweh. The constant reminder, I'm Yahweh, that it is Yahweh who is giving these commandments. And sometimes in some of the more important commandments, we saw an extended version, such as Ani Yahweh Elohecha, I am Yahweh your God, or even in some cases where Yahweh really, where the Torah really wants to drive the point home, Ani Yahweh Elohecha, Asher Otzitecha Otzeicha me Otzeticha me Eretz Mitzrayim, who took you out of the land of Egypt. But we're seeing all these variations of Yahweh saying, Ani Yahweh, I am Yahweh, and pointing out that he's holy, and so we're supposed to be holy, or because we set him aside to make him holy, that we're supposed to be holy. And we see this theme repeated here. And this is, again, very typical of this section of Torah that the secular scholars call the Holiness Code. Once again, the secular scholars believe, we've spoken a bit about the documentary hypothesis. I, as I've mentioned many times, do not at all accept the documentary hypothesis, but it's important to know what it is, because if you're kicking around biblical circles, Torah circles, non-religious Torah circles, it's going to come up again and again and again. And I've mentioned this professor, Joel Baden, from Yale University. I think he's a professor of religion in the divinity school or something like that. I don't remember exactly what his exact title is. The guy's brilliant guy, Jewish, has a very Jewish kind of attitude towards things, a little bit too Jewish. But one of his big things is he's very into the document. He's not a religious Jew. He's very traditional, but he's not religious. He's very into the documentary hypothesis, and I think he's come up with, I think he calls it the neo-documentary hypothesis or something like that. But basically, it's just a more refined version of this documentary hypothesis. The documentary hypothesis became popular in the 1800s among the secular scholars of Europe, secular biblical scholars of Europe, Germany in particular. Surprise, surprise. And it states that the Torah is put together from different sources. The four main sources, they say, are the P, E, J, and D sources. We don't have to get into what it means, but that the Torah is not from God. It's not divine. It's not even the quotes of prophecies of Moses and other people that is then assembled by a scribe. What it basically is a conglomeration of four previous documents that contradict each other in many places, and that were brought together into a single document called the Torah. I've mentioned many times that I obviously don't believe this at all. I believe, for lack of a better word, that it's about Shalom Christian, that the Torah is divine, although the story may be a little bit more complex than just a simple story of Yahweh dictating every single word. But I think there was a single scribe, which may very well have been Yoshua. Often we see in the Tanakh that prophets will have a scribe, a sidekick, and that sidekick acts as their scribe. So it's very possible that Yoshua bin Nun was the one who put together the final version of the 5 books of Moses, of the Chumash. Whatever, we don't need to get into all of this right here. It's not the point. But even if that is the case, then Yoshua is a faithful servant to be able to quote the life and times of Moses, the prophecies that Moses experienced. And certainly Moses was getting plenty of information from Yahweh, since they spoke face to face, as it says in the end of the book of Deuteronomy. At any rate, I digress. So, right. The point here is that we see some of these typical themes in the Holiness Code, where Yahweh is saying, my holy name, and speaking about the holy items, and speaking about and mentioning Ani Yahweh, right? The basic idea is that the Cohanim are responsible for making sure that these holy items, these Kedoshim, Kache B'nai Israel, as it says here, let me highlight that verse. Okay, Mikache B'nai Israel means from among the holy items of the children of Israel. Hold on a second. It's a bit hot here. Let me just turn down the heat just for 1 second. Give me 1 second, please. And even the word, it's often translated as the holy items of, oops, let's rearrange here. The whole, here it says or be translated usually as the holy items of the children of Israel, but a much better translation, and I'm guessing Robert Alter picks up on this, is going to be the dedicated, here, the sacred donations. Okay, that's a good translation. Really what it means is the dedicated items of the children of Israel. There's this idea in the Tanakh, which is a very simple, straightforward idea. And this idea is that, and we've spoken about this before, that when you dedicate something to Yahweh, you set aside something to Yahweh, it now takes on a special status. It's now no longer just a run-of-the-mill thing. Now it has a special status. It has a status of a kodesh, okay, a set aside or dedicated thing. Okay, so if I take, I don't know, I take this. What do I have here? This throw pillow, and I say I hereby set aside this throw pillow as a donation to. I won't say it because I want my throw pillow as a donation to Yud K Vav K. Okay, then this throw pillow is now considered a kodesh. It's now considered a holy item, and now it has to be treated with a higher level or with a special level of respect and veneration. And in particular, it now can no longer come in contact. We've spoken throughout our studies in Leviticus, and can now no longer come in contact or become itself ritually impure, which we've translated as the kudis. Okay, so I now cannot. If I've dedicated this throw pillow to Yahweh, okay, I want to give it to the Cohanim so they can sit on it in the temple. It's a gift of mine to the temple, to Yahweh. Then now it can no longer come in contact. It can no longer become tameh. It can no longer become ritually impure, is the way it's usually translated. We've translated as getting the kudi. So I can no longer take this throw pillow and I don't know, use it as a pillow for a dead body or something like that, because then it would attract a dead bodies lying on top of it. It would now attract the kudis, and then I can't take this kudied up throw pillow and bring it into the province of the Beit HaMikdash. Okay, when I say Beit HaMikdash, that always includes tabernacle, temple, whatever structure at that point is the structure that exists for the cultic, quote unquote, systematic worship of Yahweh. Okay. So these holy items, or these items that are dedicated, I think the word dedicated items is much better. Okay. So the dedicated items of the children of Israel. So it's the Kohanim's job to make sure we nazru Yikache ben Israel. Okay. And let's get a translation of that, verse 2. Okay. That they keep apart from the sacred donations of the Israelites, lest they profane my holy name, which they consecrate to me. I am the Lord, I am Yahweh. Okay, and let's see exactly what that means. Okay, let's move on. Any comments, any questions so far? A lot more to say about this. Alrighty, verse 3. It's a long one, so let's break it down into its 2 verselets. As I always say, the real name is a verset, but I like verselet better, so I say verselet. Let's find our semicolon. There's in just about every verse in the entire Tanakh, with very few exceptions, you can always break down a verse into 2 subverses, into 2 verselets. And you want to look for this little symbol here, this little wishbone looking thing. It's called an etnachta or an atnach, and that essentially acts as a semicolon. So because this is a rather long verse, let's break down the verse into 2 semi-verses. And it says here, verse 3, Emor alehem l'dorotechem. Okay, so speak to who? Speaking to the children of Aaron, right? To the priests. Amor alehem l'dorotechem, kol ish asher ikrav mikol zarachem el hakodashim asher yaktishu bnei Israel Yahweh with thum ato alao. Okay, so say to them. I'm sorry, this is 1 second. The daughter, just get the context here. Okay, so right. I'm sorry. So this is what. Okay, so Yahweh spoke to Moses, and then what he said is to be given over to Aaron, and now Aaron is being told this is what you say to the children of Israel. Okay, so to say to them. And if I'm picking up the context here correctly, which I think I am, say to them, meaning say to the children of Israel throughout your generations, l'torotechem, kol ish asher yikrav mikol zarachem el hakodashim asher yaktishu bnei Israel. Wait 1 second. Let me just get this straight in my head. I'm sorry. This is being spoken to I take that back. Erase that previous sentence. This is being spoken to the Kohanim, because the Kedoshim, these dedicated items, now essentially become the property of Yahweh, but they are essentially gifts to the Cohanim. Okay, so say to them, say to the Cohanim, throughout your generations, called ish asher yukrav mikol zarachem, any person from among your descendants, literally from among your seed. And I have a friend who I haven't been in contact with him in a while. I should write him again. He points out very correctly that in many, many cases, when the word zarachem, which literally means your seed, is used, it's speaking specifically about the male descendants, because seed, right, like semen, seed, right, it's passed on from father to son, that DNA, and so it's really speaking here to the male. This is a message being given to the male priests, and the only priests that served in the temple and that officiated were male priests. Okay, so anyone from among all of your seed, okay, who approaches these items that have been dedicated to Yahweh, the set aside items, asher yaktishu b'nei Israel, that the children of Israel have dedicated, okay, have donated or dedicated Yahweh to Yahweh, with tumato alav, and literally his impurities upon him. But what that really means is we know from our language, our street language, that this person has the cooties. Okay, so it's talking about a priest. Remember, okay, once again, just let's back up a bit. When the children of Israel dedicate or donate something to the temple, to Yahweh, this now becomes a special dedicate. I thought I heard a siren. God almighty, thank God, no. It now becomes a special dedicated item. It has to be treated with particular reverence. In particular, it cannot in any way come in contact with the cooties, with tu'umah. Tu'umah is usually translated as ritual impurity. We translate it as having the cooties, okay? And so what this is, but in reality, what happens is it becomes the gift. It becomes a gift to the Cohanim, okay? And so any Kohen who is in a state of ritual impurity, who has the cooties, and approaches one of these dedicated items, one of these items that has been dedicated to Yahweh while he has the cooties, that's the first half of the verse. ונכרתה הנפש ההיא מלפני אני Yahweh. That person shall be cut off from before me. I am Yahweh. Okay. Well, this is an interesting statement for a number of reasons. We've seen this kind of punishment before. It's called Karaite. It means excision, but it's usually what it usually says is Karaite is nichrata nefesh ahi me v'nei Israel, that this person is cut off from the children of Israel, which could mean a lot of things. Nobody's 100% sure what it means. Its most simple meaning is you are no longer considered to be part of the nation of Israel. Maybe, pack your bags and, pack up your SHI, and GTFO, get out, you're no longer part of this nation. And it's really reserved for some of the more serious crimes. Well, this time that usual formula is broken. It doesn't say that such a person or such a Kohen who approaches the dedicated items, the items dedicated to Yahweh, while that Kohen is in a state of ritual impurity, while he has the cooties, is to be cut off from the children of Israel. It says that that person will be cut off from before me, Ani Yahweh. What does that mean? Well, it's easy to just brush right over this and skip by it, but it really should be blaring right out at us. Okay. First of all, what that probably means in its most basic sense is that person, that Kohen, is no longer allowed to serve in his role as a Kohen. He's now kicked out of the priesthood because he cootied up the items that were dedicated to Yahweh. Just as when it says if someone among the children of Israel does something bad, and we saw a number of examples, and it's cut off from among the children of Israel, pack your ass up and GTFO. Now, if a Kohen has done something wrong, well, he's kicked out from before me, says Yahweh. And again, we have the closing phrase here, Ani Yahweh. Again, so typical of this holiness code. And on face value, what it means is that he's now kicked out of the priesthood. Okay, he has cootied up the dedicated items, the items dedicated to Yahweh, and now that's it, gone, get out, done. you're fired. All right, let's get a little commentary. Let's do a little Robert Alter, then maybe we'll do a little bit of Ibn Ezra. We need to. Okay. Okay, verse 2. Syntactical interpolation of the clause after this one makes the sentence slightly unclear. Absolutely. But the evident motive is to effect a strong thematic juxtaposition of the antonyms kedoshim and halalu, profane. And remember, we said the word to profane something in our context doesn't mean, it has nothing to do with profanity, like cursing or pornography or something like that. Profane just means to take a special item that's been set aside, that's been dedicated to Yahweh, and treat it like it's just a regular item. This means to turn something special into something average. Okay, with the verb's direct object, Shem Kedoshi, my holy name, reinforcing the link between divine sacredness and the divine donations. It may at first seem puzzling that the priest should be enjoined to keep apart from the sacred donations of the sacrificial animals that were, after all, their sustenance. But the next verse makes clear that this warning to the priest obtains in cases when they're in a state of ritual impurity. So Rashi observes. Okay, finally, Rashi, broken clock is right twice a day. So Rashi got something for once, if that is indeed what Rashi says. My feelings about Rashi. I told you that many years ago. Oops. Why did this fall out? 1 second, please. Many years ago, when I used to type in Rashi's name in 1 second, please. Just make sure that the cord doesn't fall out again. When I used to type in Rashi's name in the word processor, it would autocorrect it to Rash. Rashi would become Rash. And I was like, that's about right. Rashi is one of the worst Torah commentators ever in the history of Torah commentators, which is exactly why the rabbis and the rabbinites love him so much, because they love Drek and they hate anything that's logical and straightforward and makes sense. Drek, by the way, means mire, mud, dirt, crap. They love crap and hate anything that makes sense. Anywho, so getting back to this idea, let me just explain what Robert Alter is saying there. So it says that, let me just read it for myself, and then I'll make a synopsis of it for you guys. דבר אל אהרון ואל בניו ינזרו מקדשי בני ישראל ולא חללו את שם קדשי אשר הם מקדישים לי. אני יהוה אמור אליהם לדורותיכם כל איש אשר יקרב מכל זרעיכם אל הקודשים אשר. Okay, so I think there's no reason to belabor the point. Okay, let's just move on. Okay. Right. So kicked out of the priesthood. Let's see if Robert Alter picks up on that one. So who draws near, as Jacob Milgram, one of the leading experts on the Levitical system, on the book of Leviticus, repeatedly notes this all-purpose verb in context of ritual prohibition means to encroach. But when the ritual act is permitted, it means more neutrally to enter into the sacred zone. Okay, correct. Okay, so I think we pointed that out. And let me just say exactly what Robert Alter is talking about there, quoting Milgram. And he's talking specifically about this word here. Where is it? Something called ish sheyikrav. This word here. So any priest that comes close or approaches the dedicated items while he has the cooties is kicked out of the priesthood. Okay, so he's speaking about this word here, approaches, and he's pointing out the fact. He's explaining, what does that mean? Does it mean just come near it? No, it means interact with these. The priests have the right to interact with these dedicated items, and it means to interact with them while they're in a state of impurity in a way they shouldn't. So to either touch them or use them. It also maybe by extension is speaking about entering into the courtyard of the tabernacle/temple. Okay, but he's pointing out the meaning of that particular word. Okay, let's move ahead. shall be cut off from before me. So here's this punishment, the Karaite. The more common locution in Leviticus is cut off from his kin. Okay, Nichrata anefshahi me amal. We mentioned that cut off from me bnei Israel, cut off from the children of Israel. This variation may suggest divestment from priestly privileges, being cut off from the sacerdotal line. Okay, so Robert Alter always talks in very fancy language, but this basically what he's saying is exactly what we said earlier. And I always like when Robert Alter agrees with me, and vice versa. And there he's clearly agreeing. What this basically means is being kicked out of the priesthood. He's saying it in his fancy language, but that's exactly what he's saying. Okay. And he's also pointing out exactly what we said, that this is not common language, that you should be cut off from before me. The common language is you should be cut off from before your people or from before the children of Israel. Okay. Okay. Verse 4. Okay. Any questions, any comments so far? Pipple. Anybody? Any questions, any comments? No? Okay, then let's move on. Verse 4. Ish ish me zerah Aaron wahu saruah ozav bekodashim lo yochal ad asher yithar. Let's stop right there. Again, we see our etnach, or nafta, that little wishbone symbol. That symbolizes that's the end of the first half of the verse, the first part of the verse. That's a semicolon essentially. So let's tackle that first half. First, ish ish, any person whatsoever. Remember, we've seen this phrase ish ish before. We know, as I say, every Torah study, repetition means what? Somebody type in. Everybody should know this by now. In the Torah, repetition means emphasis. So ish ish literally means man, man, but a good English translation would be something along the lines of every single man or every single person. In this case, it's speaking really about the male Cohanim, because they're the ones officiating. So every single man from among the seed, and the fact that it uses seed again, mentioning that this book that my friend wrote, a Karaite friend of mine wrote many years ago, pointing out that often when the word seed is used, it's also speaking specifically about the male descendants. We know that in the Torah and in the Tanach, all descendancy goes by the father, not by the mother. This is again something that the rabbis completely made up, probably taking it from the surrounding cultures, some of whom went by the mother to determine identity. And but here ish, I mean, here we have ish, each and every man, mizera, from the seed equals semen equals sperm, right? The male descendancy line of Aaron, right? So clearly it seems to be speaking to the male priests, the ones who are actually serving in the priesthood. Females do not serve in the priesthood in the cult. And remember, cult in this context does not mean, like Eshet Torah or something like that. It means, or being a Democrat. A cult means it means the systematized service to a deity, in this case to Yahweh, right? So in the cultic worship of Yahweh, so any man whatsoever, emphasis, we see that this is something important that's coming up. V'hu tzarua ozav. What is tzarua? Well, we spent a number of chapters, maybe the most difficult chapters of Leviticus, learning about tzara'at. Tzara'at is often translated incorrectly as leprosy. Some of the better translations will translate it as something like skin blight or scale disease or something along those lines. But it's some kind of ailment to the skin. We saw it before. We saw in detail the symptoms of having this condition and how to potentially get out of it, or how to be declared as being clear of this condition. That was back in Leviticus chapter 11-ish, 12-ish, something. No, Leviticus 11 is kashrut. I think 12, 13, thereabouts. And so colloquially speaking, leprous. So anyone who has this tzara'at, who has a skin condition, Well, if you have the skin condition, you're automatically in a state of impurity. That's what those chapters in earlier chapters in Leviticus are dealing with. Or zav. What is a zav? And by the way, the male form zav is being used here, not zava. We learned both about a zav and a zava. A zav is when you have an unexpected flow from your private part. In the case of the male, it means some kind of discharge from the penis. In the case of the female, it means some kind of discharge from the vagina, which has nothing to do with either menstruation, or childbirth. It's some kind of irregular discharge, some kind of something's wrong down there. Let's put it that way. time to bring that that sucker into the shop. Something ain't right down there. And so this is speaking about a some kind of discharge. We learned about it again earlier in the book of Leviticus from the male private part, from the penis. Okay, so anyway, and that immediately enters a person into a state of ritual impurity, into a state of having the cooties. I mean, listen, right? We said the cooties. We said this whole idea of tameh and tahor, of having being in a state of ritual purity or ritual impurity, is actually quite straightforward. It's actually quite intuitive, quite logical, quite involves basically common sense. The rabbis make it into this big mystical, magical, who knows why, and it has to do with life being discharged and make. Oops. There we are. We're back. But actually, it's quite straightforward. And I always give the mashal. I always give the analogy of the 3 garbage cans. Okay. And to illustrate this point of tameh, I'll give the analogy once again, even though I've given it a number of times before. Okay, you have 3 garbage cans in your house, or maybe in your backyard. You don't want them in your house. One is just for regular garbage, receipts, shopping lists. I don't know, empty Coke can or something like that. The other one is for pretty disgusting things, like smelly, stinky things, like, I don't know. Let's say you step in a pile of dog poop and it gets on your shoe, and then you wipe it off with some paper towels. Okay, you throw that in the second garbage can. Or let's say, I don't know, you I don't know, you have mud, you get mud all over your face, and you wash it off, and throw the paper towel in the garbage can, stuff like that, right? Pretty gross, but okay. But then there's a third garbage can, and this third garbage can is for the stuff that it's like, you don't just think it's smelly and dirty and disgusting. It's like, ew, like, please get that away from me right now. Okay, that is the cooties level stuff. Okay, so the example I give is, you're walking in your front yard, and there were a couple of there was a couple that was having some fun in their car the night before, and they tossed the dirty condom into your front yard. Okay, are you putting that in garbage can number 1 with the receipts, the discarded receipts and shopping lists? Heck no. Are you putting that in garbage number 2 with the dog crap and the mud? Heck no. You're gonna make a special garbage can for that. That you don't want that anywhere near the other stuff, because this is just so nasty, so disgusting, so ew, that you just want it completely separated. Kind of like bio waste, right? This is like bio waste essentially. And maybe in that sense it does have to do with death. I don't know, but it's basically bio waste, right? It's nasty. It's just like, ugh, get that out of my face, kind of thing, right? So you're going to take that discarded condom from last night's revelers, and you're going to throw that in a special third garbage can. Maybe you'll mark it with a little biohazard symbol, but you want it separate, right? You don't want that sitting around with the rest of your garbage, okay? Or let's say you find a dead mouse or something like that, okay? Is that going in garbage can number 1, garbage can number 2, or garbage can number 3? That's going in garbage can number 3. That is some nasty stuff, man. Okay? Or if you find, I don't know, a woman has had her, her period on. Oh, this is getting too graphic. You guys get the idea, okay? You guys get the idea. That's what ritual impurity is. That's what being in a state of tu'umah. That's what tameh. That's what having the cooties is in the Torah. It's the only thing that really prevents one from coming close to Yahweh in the sense of coming into the province of the Beit HaMikdash, the tabernacle/temple, or touching those items, coming in contact with those items that have been dedicated to Yahweh. If you have the cooties, if you have something that is uh, um, warranted or that deserves to be thrown in that third garbage can or anything along those, anything like that. Okay, so and it's very logical, right? It's very logical. And you can walk into the province, you can walk into the courtyard of the tabernacle of the Holy Temple with dog crap on your shoes. Okay, you might want to wipe it off, But if you walk into the temple courtyard, listen, there were a lot of animals going up and down that up and down the approaches to that temple courtyard. So there's gonna be a lot of poop. It reminds me when I lived in Portugal, lived in a very small town, and we had like flocks of sheep sometimes going through the town. You'd hear and there'd be like hundreds of sheep running right in front of my front door. Sometimes you'd have goats, horses, sometimes cows. I mean, anything and everything, and there was all kinds of poop all over the place. And believe me, I was constantly stepping in it. Okay, but I just left my shoes out on the front porch and went on with my day and took the hose later and washed it off. Right, but the point is that if I had walked with those shoes into the courtyard of the Beit HaMikdash, there's nothing illegal about that. There's nothing in the Torah that speaks out against that. However, if I have some kind of weird goop coming out of my, then that is too nasty. That is garbage can number 3. That is bio waste. That's biohazard level. And I'm not allowed to sully up. I'm not allowed to nasty up God's private house or God's special house with that level of nastiness. So again, we see the Torah is very reasonable. In everything the Torah does, we see it's actually, I don't want to use the word liberal because it's such a loaded word, but it's reasonable. It makes sense. There's nothing extreme really about it. The rabbis have turned it into something bizarre, strange, extreme, but it's not really. It's really very straightforward. Okay. Exactly, Tsurio. Exactly. Okay, so these are different types. This is quote unquote leprosy, bad translation, but we'll go with it for now. This is a male who has a strange discharge from his private part, from his penis. And now he's in a state of tumah. He's in a state of having the cooties, in a state of ritual impurity. So if he, v'yitzaru azav, and this is again speaking about the priest, one of the priests. So it says, Kodashim lo yochal ad asher yitar. He's not allowed to eat of the items, the food that's been dedicated to Yahweh. When you dedicate food to Yahweh, and we'll get to that eventually, the laws of when you have to, but you can also do it on a voluntary basis. When you dedicate food to Yahweh, that becomes a gift to the priests, and it is their salary in a sense, right? They don't have a land inheritance in Israel. They are not literally, but figuratively and kind of spiritually chained to the Beit HaMikdash. And so they their salary is the parts of the various sacrifices that are allowed to be eaten by them, and those items that are being dedicated to Yahweh. Yahweh doesn't need them, right? What does Yahweh need with a tuna fish sandwich? So that becomes the becomes the gift to the Cohanim. But if a Kohen is in a state of ritual impurity, if he has the cooties, he's not allowed to eat these dedicated items, these foods that have been dedicated to Yahweh. He can go down to the local kosher McDonald's and get a hamburger, but he cannot eat the items that have been dedicated, the food items that have been dedicated to Yahweh. Okay? And that's what this verse is saying. Let's go on. והנורע מכל טמא נפש, או איש אשר תצא ממנו שכבת זרה. And also, now we're listing other ways that a priest can acquire ritual impurity, can get the cooties. Nogeh b'kol tamei nefesh, any person who already is in a state of ritual impurity. Again, we learned this earlier in Leviticus. the different ways that a person can attract ritual impurity, and one of them is touching somebody or being touched by somebody who already is in a state of ritual impurity, or a man who has a seminal emission who ejaculates. Okay, another way, when you just have a regular seminal emission, when you have regular ejaculation, that immediately puts you into a state of ritual impurity, and you remain so. You have to bathe your flesh, which probably just means that particular area, and you wait until the evening, and then you're free, and then you're back into a state of ritual purity. But at the moment that happens, until you purify yourself, you're in a state of ritual impurity. Verse 5. Let's go up to here. O ish asher ira b'kol sheretz asher yitma lo, and any man who touches in any creepy crawly thing. We also learned about this back in Leviticus chapter 11, asher yitma lo, which will impart ritual impurity to him. On Adam asher yitma lo, or any human being who will impart ritual impurity to him, will give him the cooties, okay, according to any way or any other way that the priest can become ritually impure. Let's get a little translation and commentary on this. This is verse 4. Okay. Any man whosoever from the seed of Aaron, when he is smitten with skin blanch or discharged from his member, shall not eat of the sacred donations until he becomes clean, nor he who touches anything unclean to a dead person, or a man who has had an emission of seed. Let me just see something here for myself. Okay. Nor a man who has touched any swarming thing, by which one becomes unclean, or a human being by which one becomes unclean with any uncleanliness. Okay. All right, let's get a little commentary. Verse 5, a human being, this noun is the object of the double duty verb touched. What is he saying? Look at this for myself for a second. 5. Second. Dumb. Wait, one more second. Human being. Verse 5. 1 second. I just want to see what he's trying to say here. Verb touched. 1 second. Ish asher yiga sheretz sheitmano. Adam sheitmano. Okay. Okay. He's just saying it. Okay, got it. It's not important. We can just move ahead. Okay, so basically, if you are in a state of ritual impurity, then you better stay away. Or if you're a priest, you're not allowed to eat of the food items, the edible items, not the edibles, people, the edible items that have been dedicated, that have been set aside, that have been dedicated to Yahweh. Okay, that brings us up to verse 6. Any questions, any comments so far? Right, kosher McDonald's, no cheeseburgers. And believe me, there are a lot of kosher McDonald's around Israel. And no, they don't have cheeseburgers. Okay, any questions, any comments so far? Anybody? Okay. Let's move on to verse 6. Okay, nefesh asher gabo with tam'a ad ha'arev v'lo yochal min hakadoshim ki im rahatz bisaro b'mayim. And just 1 second. Okay, if I'm picking this verse up correctly, let me just see something. Uh-huh. One second. Okay. Right. So this is really continuing on. נוגע, או איש אשר ייגע בכל שרץ אשר יטמע לו, או בדם אשר יטמע לו לכל טומאתו. So if I'm picking this up correctly, verse 6 is referring to verse 5. Again, verse 5 says any man, meaning any male Kohen, any male priest who touches in any animal that causes him to have ritual impurity, or in any man that causes him to have any ritual impurity, according to any way that they can make him, or in any way they can make him ritually pure, then this person one second. Right. So that priest who's touched either that animal or that man, then he is in a state of ritual impurity until the evening, okay, until the sun sets. And he's not allowed to eat of the items that were dedicated to Yahweh. And he's not allowed to eat of the items dedicated to Yahweh until he washes his flesh in water. Now, does this mean his entire body? Does this mean the part of the body that he used to touch the that he touched the animal or the person with? I think it's up for argument. Probably the entire body would be my guess. It says wash his flesh. Now let me just see something. Mhm. So the question I have for this is this an extra added commandment, or is this an extra added stringency that applies just to the Cohanim? And I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to go back and compare it to when we originally learned about the laws of Tumat and Tahara. But we're going to leave it for now. This is the question that I'll ask myself and put aside for now. Okay. Verse 7. But at any rate, what we do see here is that for Kohen, if he becomes impure in any way, or if he touches an animal or person that causes him to become impure, then he remains impure until the sun sets and until he washes his flesh, okay, until he bathes himself. And then it says, verse 7, Shemesh witaher. And when the sun sets, he is now returned to his state of ritual cleanliness. He's gotten rid of the cooties. And afterwards, he can once again resume. I'm adding a couple words there. And once again, he can eat. And afterwards, he can eat from the items dedicated to Yahweh, the food items dedicated to Yahweh. This is his food. This is his bread. This is his bread and butter. Okay? He relies on this stuff. So Yahweh is not making a long, complicated process. We saw earlier in Leviticus that for certain conditions such as tzara'at, skin blight, quote unquote leprosy, that it's a long, drawn out process that could involve many weeks before the person is cured or returns to a state of ritual purity after being cootied up by having this skin blight. What the Torah is saying here is that if the Kohen touches an animal or a human being, another human being, that makes him ritually impure, and then he's gotten rid of the cooties, he's back in a state of ritual purity. Because Yahweh understands that the Kohanim, again, the Kohanim, the Levites, don't have any share in the land of Israel. They don't have a territory that's set aside for them as the other 11 tribes do. And 12 tribes, because Manasseh and Ephraim are split into two. I mean, Joseph is split into two, Ephraim and Manasseh. So they don't have an inheritance in the land of Israel. They don't have a certain part of the land of Israel that's set aside for them. The only thing they have that's set aside for them are the Levitical cities and the province of the tabernacle slash temple. Okay, so they rely. They don't have loads of land to grow things and run businesses and stuff like that. They're priests. Their business is doing God's work. And so they rely for their salary on the contributions, the donations. I shouldn't say contributions or donations, the things dedicated by the children of Israel to Yahweh. That becomes the Yahweh's gift to the Kohanim and to the Levites. So Yahweh understands here, not that he's not making a harsh set of rules to get out of the state of ritual uncleanliness if the priest enters into it. That all he has to do is wash himself, bathe himself, and wait until the sun sets, and then he's back in business, because Yahweh understands that the Kohanim, not having land of their own, rely on these gifts from the people, from the children of Israel. Okay? Okay. Any questions, any comments? Shabbat Shalom, Paul. So we can get a commentary here. For this is bread. As often elsewhere, bread is a synekdoche. We've seen this word before. Robert Alter loves to use it. Synekdoche means where a part represents a whole or a whole represents a part. And the classic example they always give is Washington spoke to Moscow. Okay, well, it doesn't mean that doesn't mean the city of Washington called up the city of Moscow. Washington represents, I guess you could say, the president of the United States. Moscow represents my man Putin, my main man. And it means really that Biden, or whatever's left of Biden, spoke to Putin, right? Or at least diplomats of the American government spoke to diplomats of the Russian government. Okay, so as elsewhere, so that's what synekdot is. So here it says bread, but bread is just a stand-in. It's a part that represents the whole. It's a stand-in for all of the food, all of the items that are being dedicated by the children of Israel, that are the gifts, or that end up being gifts given by Yahweh to the Kohanim. Okay. In fact, the typical sacred donation would have been meat. Good point. Okay, so it couldn't literally mean bread. The word lechem literally means bread, but Robert Alter is saying that it's a stand-in for all of the food. Just as Moscow is a stand-in for Moscow speaking to Washington is a stand-in for Putin speaking to Biden. Okay, let's move on. Verse 8. Nivela u trefan lo yochal litam'ah ba ani Yahweh. So a Kohen is not allowed, and we've seen this in general, but here it's being stated specifically for the Kohanim. A nivela is an animal that died on its own, and a trefa is an animal that was ripped apart by another animal that was killed as prey. Lo yochal, it's the same thing that is said when the other brothers of Joseph bring back the Ketonet Apasim, the multicolored dream coat of Joseph, when they bring it back to Jacob. Then Jacob says, Yosef Tarof Toraf, I'm quoting it exactly, has clearly been ripped apart by animals. That's the same word here, Tarefa. Okay, so Nivela, an animal that died on its own, Utarefa, an animal that was preyed upon and killed by another animal and left, to rot. Lo yochal, Abba ani Yahweh. This is also considered just like the discarded condom in the front yard and the all the other stuff. We don't have to go over it again. This is considered, garbage can number 3. This is nasty, right? Animals that died on their own and just like rot on the side of the road. And terefa, animals that are preyed upon and ripped apart by other animals and left to rot and die. This is not appropriate for any of the children of Israel to be eating, but here it's specifically speaking about the Kohen. We see it elsewhere where it's speaking about the children of Israel, but this is reiterating it for the Kohen, that if they eat it, they also enter a state of ritual impurity. So stay away from that. Okay. Now I'm sorry, my southern friends. I know that basically, there goes your lunch, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I know you guys like to, take aardvarks or armadillos off the side of the road and, cook them up. But you can't do that anymore, guys. Alrighty, my southern friends. I love you guys. I'm just teasing. I always like to make some jokes. Okay. Alrighty. Remember, no dead armadillos off the side of the road, boys and girls. Okay. Verse 8. Does Robert Alter have to say anything about that? No, he doesn't. Verse 9. Shamru et mishmarti. Rearrange the seat here. Shamru et mishmarti v'lo is'u alav chet umetu bo ki yachalaluhu ani Yahweh mikad sham. So Shamru et mishmarti, keep my charge is the way this is usually translated. Shamar means to keep, protect, guard. So guard my, I don't know, I hate the translation, keep my charge. That's the way they usually translate it. See, Robert Alter comes up with something better. Keep my watch, okay, a little bit better. Okay, be careful to keep guard over these things. Okay, so keep my watch, we'll go with that, and do not bear upon it any kind of sin. In other words, don't disobey it. Don't sin against these laws that I've given you here. This watch, you're supposed to be watchful to make sure that you do not enter into a state of ritual impurity, or if you do, that you don't come in contact with any of the dedicated items. Okay, so keep careful of this. Maybe is a better translation. Okay, be careful to keep this to keep guard over this. Be careful. I don't know. Keep my watch. We'll go with it. Okay, okay, and don't make any mistakes over it, or don't intentionally sin over it, or inadvertently sin over it. Umetubo, and die because of it. Ki yechalaluhu, because you have profaned it. Right? You haven't been careful with it. You've turned these special laws of the special. It's really, in a certain sense, one law, right? Don't eat the dedicated items. Don't eat the holy items while you're in a state of ritual impurity. And if you just are not careful with that, if you don't keep watch over this concept, this idea, this law, this single law that's broken down into a bunch of sub laws, if you're not careful about this concept, about this charge, then and you just turn it into a regular thing, right? You're like slipshod about it, then umetubo, then it will cause your death ultimately. And we've seen this again and again throughout the book of Leviticus, that one of the things that really causes problems is when the sanctity of Yahweh's province, of Yahweh's home, is not respected, and the items, and likewise the items dedicated to Yahweh, are not respected. When we've seen this before, let me bring it up if I can for 1 second. And I'm taking this chart from, 1 second, from a brilliant lecture series I saw many years ago, and I've watched it over the years again and again, from Christine Hayes. If you look up Christine Hayes Old Testament, also a professor from Yale University. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. She knows Tanakh she knows Gemara probably 10 times better than most rabbis. Okay, and Talmud, that is. And she also just does a brilliant series on Tanakh. And let's see if I can find this. Here we go. And she always points this out. Okay, I think she even puts a chart. Oops. Let's see if I can do this. 200%. Is that going to be enough? Yeah, good enough. Okay. This is what everything comes down to essentially when we're talking about purity and impurity. Okay. There's the holy and there's the profane. The holy is kadosh. The profane is chol. There's the clean and the unclean. So what is the holy? The holy, really the only things, for the most part, throughout the Torah, throughout the Tanakh, that are considered holy are anywhere that's in the presence of Yahweh, meaning the tabernacle, the temple, or sometimes when the Ark of the Covenant goes out from that place, then the camp of the Israelites. But essentially the tabernacle and the temple. Tabernacle was the tent. The temple was the building that was permanently erected in on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem, although there's some indication that already there was a structure in Shiloh. At any rate, so that's that which is holy, which is kadosh, or that which is chol. Excuse me. Or let's start here. If you're in a state of uncleanness, if you have the cooties, and you come into contact with something that's profane, a regular day thing, right? A sandwich, or you sit on the bus, or whatever, no big deal. If you have the cooties and you come into contact with something that's holy, either the tabernacle / temple area or one of the things dedicated to Yahweh, that's the big no-no. If you're in a state of cleanliness, then you can have contact with either one. If you're not a Kohen, or if you're not a Levite, you're not allowed to eat of the holy items that dedicate to Yahweh, but you can come into the province of the tabernacle or the temple if you're in a state of cleanliness. And it doesn't matter. You can go also down the street and to the marketplace and on a bus if you're in a state of cleanliness. If you're in a state of uncleanliness, you can go down the street into the marketplace on the bus, no problem, but you cannot come in contact with the holy areas, the holy provinces of Yahweh. That's the big no-no, when the holy comes in contact with the unclean. And this is what we're talking about here. This is everything we've been talking about here. And this is a lot of what we've been dealing with whenever we're dealing with the issues of tameh and tahor, of ritual impurity and ritual purity, ritual uncleanliness, ritual cleanliness. We're dealing with this very idea. The whole thing is to make sure that nothing that is in a state of ritual uncleanliness, nothing that has the cooties, comes in contact with something that's holy. And the things that are holy essentially mean the tabernacle, the courtyard of the tabernacle / temple, and the items that have been dedicated to Yahweh. And that's what this is all about. Okay? Alrighty. Does Robert Alter have anything to say about this? So verse 9, this is review verse 9. Okay, keep my charge and do not commit any sin against it and thereby die because of it, because of not keeping carefully this charge, not keeping carefully the idea of refraining from coming in contact with holy items when you're in a state of ritual impurity. And you die because of it, because you have profaned it. You have not treated it with the care that it needs to be treated with. I am Yahweh who makes them holy. Them speaking about the sons of Aharon, the priests. So what does Robert Alter have to say about that one? Bear fence and die through it. Both of the pronouns here are masculine, though the only adjacent noun that might be a candidate for an antecedent, watch, is feminine. One second. Let me just catch this. Mishmarti, he's saying, is feminine. Shamru. Just one second. I don't know if we need to get into this, but let me just understand it first. Both the pronouns here are masculine. Pronouns. Allow. hate, umetu bo. These are the two pronouns, allow and bo. Ah, okay, I see his point. 1 second. Jason, okay. 1 second, let me read ahead here. Various efforts to rescue grammatical consistency, e.g., that the antecedent is in elided. Shamkot she, elided. I just ran into this word a lot recently, but I forgot what it means. Let's look up elided. Omitted when speaking. Second. Let me just get what Robert Alter's saying, and then I'll decide whether it's worth it to go over it or we'll just move on. The antecedent is an elided Shamkot she. Okay, got it. My holy name seems strange. Absolutely, would be more likely that the requirements of gender consistency in modern lesson language did not altogether obtain for biblical grammar, and that it seemed natural to use a masculine form for impersonal construction, such as bear offense for it. Absolutely. Oh boy, this is something I've been. Okay, this is a technical grammatical point, but I always like to say it, and it's important to know if you guys get into biblical Hebrew. Number and gender do not always match up in biblical Hebrew, right? For those of you know, for instance, Spanish, okay? And you say, I don't know, let's see, what would be an example? You know, Isla Bonita, right? Those are two feminine, that's a feminine noun followed by a feminine adjective, a beautiful island, right? Or if you have a masculine noun, it would be followed by a masculine adjective. So in Spanish, I don't know, what would be an example? I don't know. What's an example? I can't think of something offhand. I don't know. I can't think of something offhand. Let's see. House. No, that's also feminine. Sky. Cielo. Okay. Cielo lindo. Okay. A beautiful sky. Okay. So in modern Western languages where gender and number in the grammar are important, then they're generally going to match. In every language, there are some exceptions, even in Spanish and Portuguese, but they generally match. The case is also generally the case in biblical Hebrew, but it's a bit more fluid, and that's exactly what Robert Alter is saying here. To make a long story short, Robert Alter is saying that this noun here, mishmarti, is a feminine noun, but so keep my charge. Charge here is a feminine. Okay, mishmeret would be the noun. Mishmarti means my charge. But here it says do not sin over it. But over it, allow is a masculine. Over it, masculine. Umetubo, and die because of that. Die because of it. Okay, die because of it, masculine. Bo is masculine. So he's saying that the feminine noun, mishmeret, does not match up with these two pronouns that are referring to it. Sin over it, die because of it. And what Robert Alter is saying is that we can't expect in biblical Hebrew for this exact match between gender to be always enforced. It's not. Gender and number are a lot more fluid. We see constant sometimes in the same verse. In this verse here, we see switching back and forth between different numbers, meaning plural to singular, or in the case of Hebrew, there are three numbers. There's singular, dual, and plural. We won't get into that right now. And also in terms of gender, and we see that here. This is feminine, but these two pronouns modifying it, allow and bo, are masculine. And Robert Alter is saying we shouldn't expect that strict rule consistency that we're used to perhaps in Romance languages or in other Western languages. It doesn't exist in biblical Hebrew. And furthermore, what he's saying is that even though the word mishmarti, my charge, keep my charge, or keep my how's Robert Alter translated again? Keep my watch, even though mishmeret is a feminine noun, that really is no contradiction, because when it says do not sin over it, it's not talking about the noun, the word watch. It's talking about the concept of a watch, of keeping my watch, okay? Or die because of it, okay? And by the way, the it here may not actually be referring back to the watch. It actually may be referring back to the concept of not keeping the watch, okay? So it's okay that these are masculine rather than feminine. That's basically what Robert Alter is saying. We don't have to belabor it. Amivin Yavin. If you're into biblical Hebrew grammar, then you'll understand exactly what he's trying to say. And if not, it's not that big a deal. Okay, let's move ahead. Let me stop and ask, are there any questions, any comments in the meantime? Any questions, any comments? Anybody? Okie dokie. Let's move on. Let's see what we got here. Verse 10. Okay. All right, just give me 1 second. I just have to turn off the heat a little bit. It's gotten a little bit cold here. Be right back. Actually, let's take a break for 5 minutes. It'll allow me to drink a little bit of water, stretch. This is a good place to take a break. And then we will continue on in verse 10. So let me put up just a drop of music, 1 or 2 songs max. And then let's continue on. What do we got? I think we are. Oops. Okay, welcome back. Welcome back. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Shavua Tov, depending on where you are. Let's get rid of these banners. Okay, we are continuing. I am Hakham Melech Ben Yaakov. This is the World Alliance of Qara'im Torah study. We're in Leviticus chapter 22. We're going to go at it for about another half an hour or so, something like that. And then we will call it a day. So any questions, any comments so far on this stuff? By the way, we're getting close to the end of Leviticus. So Leviticus has 27 chapters. And once we get up to, is it 20? Well, 25 is really fascinating, actually. Oh, man. 25 is one of my favorite chapters. But once we get to 26, then we get more into narrative. We're going to be talking about the blessings and the curses. And 27 is a bit technical, but not as technical as the stuff we've seen before. We're not in the same way. So we're getting close. We're in Leviticus 22. So we're getting close, I would say, soon. I don't want to put a time on it, but I don't know. Another month or two, we'll be done with Leviticus, and then we can move on to Numbers. Okay, let me share the screen. I'll let my cat in. I hope that's not a bad idea. Right, Shoham? You going to behave yourself, sweetie boy? Yes, I have 3 cats. I can't resist these little creatures. Okay. Sweetie boy, come. Sit. Don't bother me now. Unless you have something to add. Okay, so we are in chapter 22. Sweetie boy, come. Here, sit down right next to me. There we go. There we go, my boy. No fighting right now. Soon. Okay. I'm telling you, if I had a farm, which I will hopefully someday, I'd have 100 cats. I'm absolutely addicted to these little creatures. They're the cutest little things and most interesting, cutest little things on planet Earth. Right, Shosho? Okay. All right. So, what do we have here? Verse 10. B'chol zar lo yochal kodesh toshav kohen usachir lo yochal kodesh. Okay, so let's talk about what this means. So the kodesh are these items, food items, because speaking about eating, okay, food items dedicated to Yahweh, dedicated to the temple, or dedicated to Yahweh. Chozar lo yochal kodesh. Literally, no stranger, or any stranger, or every stranger shall not eat of these dedicated items. What does it mean in the context of the Cohanim? The word zar, which literally means a stranger, in this case means anyone who is not a Kohen. Anyone who's not a Kohen. A zar is someone who's outside of the kahuna, is outside of the priesthood. That is a zar, a stranger in this context. Okay? So shav kohen v'sachir lo yichal bo. So literally the resident of a Kohen and his hired worker shall not eat of it. Let's talk about what this means for a second. Okay? So there are different statuses. I'm not going to get into the whole thing right now. I've gotten into it before. There are different statuses of people. Everyone in Israel, as I always like to say, you've heard me say this a million times, everyone in Israel knows their name, rank, and serial number, okay? Or not even in Israel, coming in contact with Israel in this case, okay? So a toshav is, do I want to get into the whole thing right now? No, I don't want to get into the whole thing right now. A toshav is a no, sure. Hold on. I think I have to throw the cat out. Shoham, come here, sweetie boy. Come here. Come on, baby. Shosho. No. Don't go over there. Come on. Shoham. Why don't cats come when you call? I think I'm gonna have to throw them out. Shosho, come, sweetie boy. Come here. Come, sweetie. Come on. You gonna leap? Come on, baby. There we go. Good boy. Come sit right next to me, sweetheart. No, don't crawl on the computer, please. Come, sweetie. Just relax. Give him one more chance of not have to throw him out. Okay? Come. Okay, I'm sorry. I got interrupted. Toshav. So toshav is it's uh, uh, it's a permanent. It's a permanent resident. Okay, so a toshav would be someone who I always like to use the equivalent of the American system, right? So a toshav is essentially a green card holder. It's someone who lives among the children of Israel, but he's not an Israelite. Okay, maybe he hasn't circumcised. Maybe he's not planning to stay permanently. He's there long term, but he's not part of the nation of Israel. Okay, a resident, an alien resident. There's even this concept, even in modern Israeli jurisprudence. There's the concept of a toshav. You don't have to become a citizen. You become a toshav. You basically have a status as a resident rather than a citizen of Israel. So you have fewer rights. I guess you don't get to vote. I don't know what all the details are. I'm not an immigration lawyer, but basically you have the right to live in Israel long term, but you're not a citizen of Israel. It's the same idea here. So someone who's living long term with a Kohen, but is not a ger, is not taken the plunge to become part of the nation of Israel. Again, maybe he hasn't circumcised, or maybe he's not planning to stay for the rest of his life, but he's there for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. A green card holder of a Kohen, okay, who lives with a Kohen. A sachir, what is a sachir? A sachir is basically a hired worker, a day hand. Okay, sachir is the analogy I always give in the American system is a I don't know, is it a B2? I think it's a B2 visa, whatever it is. It's like a seasonal farm worker. The seasonal farm workers that come up from Mexico during the harvest season to work in agriculture in California. That would be a sachir. He's not there long term. Okay, he's not a permanent resident. He's a hired worker that's there for a day, a week, a month, a season, and then he goes back to Mexico. Hopefully, if he doesn't decide to stay in the country. Well, Donnie boy, Donald Trump's going to take care of that, right? At any rate, so I hope. So at any rate, that's a sachir. So a sachir who's connected to a Kohen, right? So let's say a Kohen as a hired worker, keeps him around for a while. I don't know, for whatever reason. Okay, so they are not allowed to eat of the dedicated items. In general, this is another proof that a toshav and a sachir, which these are phrases we see not in the context of the Cohanim, but in just in the context of Israel, there's another sign that someone with the status of toshav, a green card holder, or sachir, a B2 visa, a seasonal agricultural worker, is not part of the nation of Israel. Okay, because if no, sweetie boy, you cannot start scratching things. Okay, come, sweetie boy, just relax. Show, no, it's not time to fight. Please, sweetie boy. Oh my God. Shoham, can you behave yourself, little guy? At any rate, it's we see that these are not part of these people with this status are not part of the nation of Israel. Okay, because there were someone that were attached permanently to the Kohen. For instance, if the Kohen had an ebed, usually translated as a servant or a slave, it's really a slave. Okay, if the Kohen had a slave and that slave was circumcised, then ostensibly that is now a permanent member of the Kohen's household, and he would be allowed to eat of the dedicated items, even though he himself is not a Kohen. He is a permanent member of the household of Kohen, and all those who are permanent members of the households of a Kohen or of any household get the status, or in a certain sense, acquire the same rights as the head of the household. Okay, all right. Let's move on. I think Robert Alter has something to say about this one. So, priest, resident hireling, Avram Melamed, whoever that is, followed by Jacob Milgram, argues persuasively that the phrase Toshav Kohen was Sachir, literally priest resident and hireling, is a hin di adis. Okay, he's used this word before. I forgot what it means. Let's look it up. Oh my, Robert Alter, why do you have to do this to me? The expression of a single idea by two words connected with and, nice and warm, when one could be used to not modify the other as nicely warm. Okay. Like the use of toshav in other combinations and does not refer to two entities. Okay. Toshav sachir. Okay, 1 second. Priest resident. Oh, I see what he's saying. Okay. I got it. יאכל קודש ושב כהן ושכיר. Okay, maybe. Kind of contradicts what I'm saying, but it's a possibility. All right, it's not relevant right now. It'll just get it too confusing if we go into it. All right, let's move on. All righty, so I'll keep that in mind. Okay, verse 11. We Kohen ki ikne. Here we go. This is exactly what we're speaking about. Okay. Kohen ki ikne nefesh kinyan kasbo hu yochal bo uyalid beto em yochlu belachmo. So this is exactly what we were saying. This is talking about a slave either that the Kohen purchases or a slave that's born in the Kohen's house. So let's say the Kohen has a slave, he gives that slave a wife, and that slave has children. That is the second instance here, Yalid. Okay, someone is born. Maybe you know the Hebrew word Yeled, which means a child or a birthling, maybe would be a better translation. Someone is born in his house. So basically, paraphrase, this is saying that any slave of the Kohen can eat of the holy items, of the dedicated items. It's exactly what we said. A slave, believe it or not, in ancient Israel, believe it or not, the slave actually has more rights in many respects than a free man just passing through. You have to think in traditional societies, even to this day, in non-Western traditional societies, everything is family. The family and the tribe and the clan that you belong to determines your status, determines everything about your life in a certain sense. Okay, so an Eved is a permanent part of the Kohen's household. He's not going in, he's not going out. We're not speaking about an Eved Ivri. We're not speaking about a Hebrew slave, which we know that according to Exodus chapter 21 is set free in the 7th year. After 6 full years, he's set free in the 7th year, kind of like the Shabbat, right? Unless he wants to stay, which reminds me of an interesting story. You know, I've been doing this Karaite thing for a while, right? This ain't my first rodeo, and I run into all types of people. So I have to say, I ran into this person texted me maybe about 2 weeks ago on you know what, I better not do that because I'm gonna forget to bring it back. He texted me about 2 weeks ago on Facebook, and he had a couple of questions. And I looked at his profile and I noticed the guy has on his profile picture, he is sitting on a couch and he has 2 women next to him and a bunch of kids surrounding the 2 women. And then on the side of the couch is some guy, maybe 30, 35 years old, young man, but definitely not one of his children, just standing there, right? And okay, I knew immediately what I'm looking at. I've dealt with this. I've been involved with this kind of thing for many years. This is obviously polygynous relationship. Those are the man's 2 wives and the kids that he had with him. Good for him. I knew, and some of us here also knew a woman who is a second wife in a polygynous marriage. She's now sadly deceased. She was a good friend of mine. Wonderful, wonderful woman. So over the years, I've had a lot of contact with people who have had of men who have multiple wives or people who've been in plural marriages. Okay, great. So there's the 2 women on the couch with a bunch of kids. Nice, kol hakavod, you know, more power to him. And then, so I asked him, who's the guy standing on the side? It's obviously not one of your children. And he says, oh, that's my manservant. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I knew exactly what he was talking about. In Exodus chapter 21, it speaks about if you have a slave, it's speaking about a Hebrew slave, but okay, if you have a slave and he does not want to leave, he says, I love my master and I love my wife and I love my children and I want to stay in my master's house. And then the master takes his earlobe is the understanding or is the implication there, and pierces through it with an awl, which is basically a spear, pierces through it with a spear into the doorpost of the master's home. And that now symbolizes that slave, that person is now tied to that master's household for life. That now becomes his slave for life. And in fact, even in modern Hebrew, there's a phrase "eved nirtzah," which it means a a slave that's been pierced through based on those verses in Exodus 21. It means like, like slave for life kind of thing. Okay. This person, this man who had the 2 wives had also acquired a manservant who wanted to stay with him for whatever reason for the rest of his life, and he had done the ceremony that's delineated in Exodus 21, put a spear through the guy's earlobe into the doorpost of the house, and now this is his manservant for life. That was his manservant. So it was 2 wives, bunch of kids, and his manservant. And then he told me that he's in the process of looking for a maidservant to purchase for his manservant. And yes, these people live in the United States of America. So that was the first time I ever heard that one. I've been around the block a million times. This ain't my first rodeo. I've heard and seen it all. That was the first time I've seen a guy who had an Eved Nirtzah, who had a lifelong manservant. Okay. Anywho, we can only dream, can't we? All right. So, right. The point is that someone like that is now, let's take this example that I just gave. This guy who's the manservant of the other guy, he's now a permanent part of the guy's household, just as the wives are permanent parts, just as the children are permanent part, at least until they grow up and move out, right? They are a permanent part of the man's household, and anyone who's a permanent part of a man's household in traditional societies and in ancient Israel acquires all the rights and benefits of the head of the household. The head of the household determines the status of every permanent member of that household. And a slave is a permanent member of a household, and that actually means that if a Kohen had purchased a slave, and this is not even speaking about a Hebrew slave, had purchased a non-Hebrew slave from a foreign nation and brought him into the house, and now is his permanent slave, that slave, who's not even an Israelite, well, ostensibly he'll be circumcised because, as is spoken about for instance, in Exodus chapter 12 with regards to the Passover offering, well, I guess we can assume that he's going to circumcise his slave because a man is required to circumcise any permanent part of his household. So if it's a male slave, he's going to circumcise him. Okay, so he's circumcised, but now that, in a sense, that means the slave, in a certain sense, has a status of ger. He's now a permanent part of the man's household, of the Kohen's household, and he's now a permanent part of the nation of Israel because he's a permanent part of this man's household. And he actually gets to eat, even though he was born in a foreign nation and uncircumcised ostensibly from a foreign nation. Now, because he's a permanent part of the Kohen's household, he actually gets to eat of the dedicated food, just as the Kohen himself and his wives, and children are able to. But someone who's just passing through, right, a green card holder who's staying with the Kohen for a while, or a seasonal worker who's staying with him even for a shorter while, they are not allowed to eat of the dedicated items, of the holy items. Okay? Fascinating stuff, if you ask me. Okay. Okay. Oh, this is one of my, okay. Oh, gosh. This, Leviticus 22, chapter, verse 12, this is something this is one of the most interesting commandments, and I won't say one of the most interesting, they're all interesting, but I bring this commandment all the time to illustrate a certain point, and I will illustrate that point. We'll go down to verse 16 and then we're going to stop. But let's look at verse 12, and we're going to see something very, very, very interesting. Any comments, any questions so far, first of all, before we go on? Okay, verse 12. And this is going to solidify, this is going to support this idea that someone who's a permanent part of a household in ancient Israel takes on the status of the head of the household. So if you are a Benjaminite of the tribe of, I don't know, the clan of Kish, as Mordechai HaYehudi in the book of Esther probably was, then you take on the identity that any of your descendants or any of your children who live with you, your wives and your slaves, your manservants or maidservants, they will take on that status. They now, for all intents and purposes, have the status of being part of that clan. And we're going to see this really laid out very clearly here. And we'll see how we can use this to point something very important out, okay? Okay, so verse 12. Ubat Kohen ki ti'eh la'ish zar. Let's go Let's take it one step at a time here. So the daughter of a Kohen, Kitiel Ish Zar, who marries, literally it says who becomes the, no, how could we tell the El Ish Zar, who becomes of I can't translate a word for it. I'm just going to paraphrase it. Okay, the daughter of a Kohen who marries a Zar. We said a Zar in the context of the Cohanim, in the context of the priest, means someone who's not a priest. So the daughter of a Kohen who marries outside of the priesthood, who marries outside of the Kuna, marries just a regular Israelite, right? Someone from the tribe of Dan or someone from the tribe of Naphtali or some whatever, right? Marries just a regular Israelite, okay? So he, b'terumat hakodoshim lo tochel, she is not allowed to eat of the donations that were dedicated. In other words, these holy donations, these dedicated donations, she's no longer allowed to eat. Okay. So when she's a child, she's a little girl, she's 8 years old, 10 years old, whatever, 15, 20, as long as she's living with her father, she's allowed to eat these dedicated items, the items that are only supposed to be eaten by the Kohanim and their households. If she gets married to an Ish Zar, to someone outside of the priesthood, now the wife takes on the status of her husband. She's now changed households from her father's household to her husband's household. So let's say her husband is from the tribe of Benjamin. She's now, for all intents and purposes, again, a Benjaminite. Okay, he's from the clan of Kish. She's now, for all intents and purposes, her status is of the clan of Kish, of the tribe of Benjamin. She takes on the status of her husband. When she's an unmarried girl living in her father's house, she has the status of her father. When she's a married woman living with her husband, she now changes status and takes on the status of her husband. That's what we're seeing here, okay? So she marries outside of the priesthood, outside of the kuna. She's no longer allowed to eat the items dedicated to Yahweh, as she did when she was a little girl living in her father's house. Now check this out. Verse 30. Oh, shoot. Okay, let's take it from here to here. Okay, so Bat Kohen kiti'eh almana u'gerusha. So the daughter of a Kohen who now marries outside of the Kuna, marries a Benjaminite, okay, and who becomes a widow or is divorced, becomes a divorced woman, was zerach enla, and she had no children. You could argue sons, but we'll go with children, okay? Was zerach enla. She has no descendants. In other words, she became a widow or divorced without having any children. Okay. Well, Shava El Beit Abiha, and she I just pressed on this. Oh, I didn't pick up. And returns to her father's house as when she was a child, as when she was an unmarried woman, as when she was a maiden. Okay. She's now allowed to eat of her father's food. In other words, of the items that are dedicated to Yahweh. Okay. We'll get to that in a second. Okay. This is super important. Okay. And I'm going to show you why it's super important. If you remember, this is one of the verses. I want to make a list of verses that it's important for Karaites to remember. This is one of them. Leviticus chapters 22, verse 12 and 13. Remember this, and I'm going to show you exactly why. Okay. This is one of the verses that I think in the most clearly proves patrilineal descent, that proves that the one's status is based on the status of one's father, not on the status of one's mother. Okay, how does it do that? Bat Kohen, let's look at it again, verses 12 and 13. Okay, so the daughter of a Kohen, she's a little girl, she's living in her father's house. Her father's a Kohen. She's allowed to eat of the dedicated foods because her father's allowed to eat of the dedicated foods. He's a Kohen. Okay, the food's dedicated to Yahweh. So she's allowed to as well while she's a little girl. She gets up, she grows up, she gets married, she marries outside the Kuna. If she marries another Kohen, then now she's, of course, allowed to continue to because her husband is a Kohen. But let's say she marries outside of the priesthood, outside of the Kuna, she marries someone from the tribe of Yisachar. Now, she's no longer allowed to eat of the the holy items because her husband, she's now part of her husband's household. She's now a permanent part of her husband's household. Her husband is not a Kohen. Her husband is from the tribe of Yisachar or whatever, and he's not allowed to eat of the items dedicated to Yahweh. So neither is she. Okay. However, if she becomes a widow or becomes divorced and she doesn't have any offspring, why is not having any offspring so important? We'll get to that in 1 second. Okay. But if she becomes a widow or she's divorced, and what is she going to do? In ancient times, if you become a widow and you're divorced and you don't have any kids, especially male children, you're going to go back. You're going to run back to daddy. Not only in ancient times, you're probably going to do that today. You live in daddy's basement for a while, right? So she goes back to daddy's house, or maybe the implication is she will inevitably go back to daddy's house. She's going to live back in her father's house, just as she did when she was a little girl. Okay. She doesn't have any offspring. She is once again, now she's back in her father's house. Even though she's been married to another guy, she became widowed or divorced without any children. She's now back living in her father's house. She's once again allowed to eat of the dedicated items, the items dedicated to the food items dedicated to Yahweh and then given to the Kohen. Now it's the dedicated items. Okay. This shows that the status of a woman in this particular instance, but anyone who is a permanent part of a household, takes on the status of the head of the household, which is the father, the patriarch of the household. This is one of the laws that so clearly proves that everything goes by the father, not by the mother, as the corrupt and bizarre and distorted rabbis switched over to during the Second Temple period, during the middle Second Temple period, and messed everything up, messed all the lineages up. I think they did it purposely. I know they did it purposely. They wanted to screw up the nation of Israel from the inside, and boy, they did a number on us. But everything will work out in the end, despite their machinations. Okay, so why is it important whether she has children or not? There are two possible reasons. I think the main reason is if you have a child, if she's a woman and she has a child with her husband, even if afterwards she's divorced or if she becomes a widow, then that solidifies that union, right? There's now a product of that union. The two came together. There's now a product that solidifies or that unifies the two together permanently, and that's the presence of a child. So she can no longer, after she has a child, can no longer go back and take on the status of her father. Another possibility is perhaps practical, that if she has a child, especially a male son who is not just a little baby but has grown up a little bit, then maybe that son can take care of her. But if she doesn't have any children whatsoever, in ancient times, if you were a woman, if you were a slave, if you were even a sahir or a toshav, even someone passing through, and you didn't attach yourself to a household, to a family, to a beit avot, to a patriarchal family, to a clan, to a tribe, you were in deep trouble. There were no such things as lone wolves in ancient Israel, as there are not in any traditional societies, even down to this age. If you go to countries where it's much more traditional society, you're part of a family, an extended family, and a village, and a clan, and a tribe, whether you like it or not. Okay, when I spent time in Morocco, up in the Atlas Mountains, up in the hills of the mountains of the Atlas Mountains, I spent close to total, not all at once, but close to nearly a year of my life. Family I became very close to, Muslims, by the way, not Jews, and you saw it there, right? There was no such thing as a lone wolf who just, like, maybe now with the influence of the West a little bit, but still, everyone was part of the family, the extended family, the village, the clan, the tribe. Everyone knew who and what they belonged to. It's the same thing here, okay? So if the daughter goes back to her father's house and she has no offspring to show of the marriage she was part of, then she can regain the status she had when she was a little girl. This, again, these verses clearly prove, in my eyes, this is one of the clearest proofs of patrilineal descent rather than matrilineal descent, because it shows that the status that one takes on, children, wives, manservants, maidservants, take on, is the status of the father, the head of the household. Okay? And that applies to the children. In the case of patrilineal descent, it applies to the children. The child takes on the status of his father, not of his mother. and his child would take on the status of his father, and so on and so forth, down through the generations. Okay? But I think it's reiterated here because it's so important. Anyone who's not a Kohen is not allowed to eat of the dedicated items. Okay? Nope. Shoshi boy. No, it's not a scratchy folks. Okay. All right, let's get a little commentary here. I hope Robert Alter has something interesting to say about this. No, he doesn't say anything about it. I'm surprised. Okay. To me, this is, as Karaites, this is one of the most important commandments of the Torah. This is a clear case of how the household you belong to, determines your status. And that status is determined by the status of the head of the household, the male head of the household, the patriarch. Okay. Verse 14. Shoshi boy, why do you think that's a scratching post? Excuse me, little boy. Sweetheart, it's not provided right now. Verse 14. I have a cat attacking my arm. Okay, verse 14. V'ish ki yochal kodesh b'shraga yasaf hamishit hamish. Let me read this correctly. Hamishito alau unatan la kohen et hakodesh. Okay, so what if somebody by mistake? So we know on purpose that someone who's not a Kohen or part of the household of a Kohen is not allowed to eat of the dedicated items, the items dedicated to Yahweh. What if someone does it by mistake? Okay, they didn't know, the signs got mixed up, or they just saw a hamburger lying on the side of the road and they're like, oh, that looks good. And they ate it, and turns out it was an item dedicated to Yahweh. What happens in such a case? Okay. Well, because it was an error, it's not treated harshly. What has to happen is that the person who did so now has to replace it to the Kohen and add a fifth onto it. So let's say I had a kilo of hamburger, and it turns out that belonged to a Kohen, and it was of the dedicated items, and I didn't know it, and I ate a kilo hamburger, and I'm like, oh, I found out later, the Kohen said, where's my hamburger? It turns out, some guy who's not a Kohen ate it. That person now has to add a fifth. What does that mean? You break the entire item, or the entire amount down into 5 parts. Okay, so I don't know. I actually, that might not be the case. I believe I'm going to say it. I'm going to say that it is correct. I'm with an asterisk. Okay, he's going to add. Actually, he's going to take 1/4 of the amount, meaning a quarter of a kilo. And now he's going to return 5 parts, okay, 1.25 kilos, which is 5 times a quarter of a kilo. Okay, so we'll return a kilo and a quarter, which is now taking the total amount. If you broke it down into it's basically 5/4 of the amount. Okay, is what? Hey, I got to throw the cat out. Just give me a second, please. Show. You can't go around scratching things. Come, sweet boy. I'm putting you outside. Okay. Not everything you see is a scratching post. Come, my love. Come, sweetie boy. Come, my boy. Come. Show. Come here, sweetie boy. Come. I'm putting you outside. We're gonna eat soon, and then you'll be nice and calm after you. Okay. Come, sweetie. Out. Okay. I'll solve that problem for now. Gonna start crying, but oh well. All right. 1 second. Okay. Okay. Right. So if you ate a kilo, you, by mistake, you return a kilo and a quarter. Okay, so five fourths. Okay, the total amount is broken down into 5 parts, and 4 of those parts should be the original amount, is what I'm trying to say. Okay, Tanach-only et kodesh. Okay, now you give that to the Kohen, and now that becomes the holy item. That becomes the dedicated item. Okay, you made a mistake. Happens. All right, Robert Alter, have anything to say about that one? Nope. Verse 15, and we're going to stop after 16. ולא יחללו את קדשי בני ישראל, את אשר יערימו ליהוה. Okay, and they should not profane the holy items of the children of Israel. Profane, again, just means make common, make something that's holy into just an average holy item. Okay, it doesn't mean spit on it. It just after sanctity that it does. Okay, in the dedicated items from the Israel et rimu Yahweh, that they literally lift up to Yahweh. The word is related to this word we saw in the previous verse. Not the previous verse. Where is it? Let me find it for a second. Here, in verse 12, Truma. Truma is usually translated as the donations to the holy donations in this case, or donations, but literally comes from the word leharim, which means to lift up, to raise up, and ultimately from the underlying root ram resh mem, which means high or exalted. Okay, and so raise up, I think it works even in the English. Okay, if I raise up donations, okay, it means I give donations to a higher cause or something like that, right? So it actually kind of works in the English. So what is it saying here? I mean, the Hebrew is so beautiful, and you really have to understand the deep meanings. And I don't mean that when the Kabbalist bullshit people say it. The deep meanings mean the underlying roots, right? Lo yachalalu, do not turn into something average that which is my holy things, or the holy things of the children of Israel, the holy things, the things that are dedicated to me by the children of Israel. Okay, rimu li Yahweh, that which they raise to give to Yahweh, or raise to Yahweh. In other words, those things with the children of Israel bring, dedicate to Yahweh, do not treat them as the Cohanim. I believe it's speaking about the Cohanim here from the context. The Cohanim should be careful with them, should not treat them as just average items. Let's see if we get a Robert Alter on that. And I bet he's going to point out that the subject is a bit ambiguous. Let's see. Yeah, of course he does. All right. So he's saying here at the end of the sentence, in the next verse, as the end of the sentence in the next verse makes clear, they refers to the priests who would profane the sacred donations by allowing unfit laypersons to incur guilt by eating them. That's Rashi. There we go with Rashi again. This whole clause mirrors the language of the opening verse, thus forming an envelope structure to bring this entire unit of the chapter to a close. All right, that's a lot to unpack there. So first of all, v'lo yechalalu. This is an ambiguous subject. Okay, this could mean, if we base it on the previous verse where it says that some average Israelite made a mistake and ate the dedicated items, and here it says they should not profane, they should not make average, they should not just treat as regular things the dedicated items of the children of Israel. Well, maybe that's speaking about the averages, or the Israelite who by mistake ate the dedicated item. But it wouldn't make sense, because then that would mean the children of Israel should not profane, or should not make average the dedicated items of the children of Israel, right? The subject and the object wouldn't. Well, the object wouldn't exactly be the same. The object is, I guess, The subject and the object essentially would be the same, and that doesn't make sense. It's kind of circular, right? So the other understanding here is that this is speaking about the Cohanim. The Cohanim, the priest, should not make average, should not profane the dedicated items, the holy dedicated items of the children of Israel. That makes a lot more sense. That they shall raise up to give to Yahweh, raise up for Yahweh. And that makes a lot more sense. And Robert Alter is pointing out that this and the following verse are kind of closing. We have always, he mentioned the envelope structure. We see this again and again throughout the Torah, that when we're introduced to a set of laws, that we usually have an opening kind of couple of introductory sentences, and at the end we have some summary sentences, and the two often mirror each other, often similar. So that's what he's saying here. Okay. If we go back to verse 1 through 2, let's do 2. Okay. Daber el Aaron, speak to Aaron, el banav, and to his children. In other words, speak to the Kohanim. Yenazru yikadshe bnei Israel, and they shall separate themselves from the holy items of brought by the children of Israel, by the items dedicated by the children of Israel. V'lo yachalalu et shem kadshi, and they shall not profane, they shall not make plain my special name, my holy name. Sherhem makdishim li ani Yahweh, that they make that they set aside for me. Okay, meaning the children of Israel when they set aside their dedicated items. Okay, so that's the opening sentence, and here we have in 15 and 16 that the Kohanim once again, okay, shall not profane the holy items, the dedicated items of the children of Israel. It's almost the same phrase we have here. Okay, v'lo yachalalu et shem kadshi asher hem makdishim li ani Yahweh, and this is speaking about again the dedicated, the items of that the children of Israel dedicate to Yahweh. Okay, so verse 15 harkens back to verse 2. Okay, the words are very similar, the concept is very similar. Okay, verse 16, وَيِسِيُ אותם עוון אשמה באכלם הקודשהם כי אני יהוה מקדשם. And by doing so, in other words, if they were to do so, if they were to do what's mentioned in verse 15, to profane, to not treat with the special sanctity, that which the children of Israel raise up to give to Yahweh as dedicated items, we see otam avon. If they do not treat it with the special sanctity, with the necessary sanctity, then we see otam avon. They will, because of them or over them, they will have lifted or have raised up iniquity and guilt. Ba'achlam, when they eat their holy, the items, their dedicated items, meaning the items dedicated to Yahweh that are given to them, to the Kohanim, Keni Yahweh, because I'm Yahweh. And again, we have that typical ending that we see throughout the holiness code. Ki ani Yahweh, I am Yahweh, reminding us, I'm sorry, Mikadsham, I am Yahweh who makes them holy. Makes who holy? The Kohanim. Basically, what this is saying, verses 15 and 16 are saying that if this is a kind of summary sentence for everything we've learned from verse 1 down through here, is that if the Kohanim do not treat with the proper sanctity the items dedicated by the children of Israel to Yahweh, which are then given to the Kohen as gifts to eat, if they do not do that, okay, but instead what they do, or by not doing that, they will raise up upon themselves, the Kohanim will raise up upon themselves sin and guilt by eating these dedicated items which are for them, okay, period. Why? Yahweh mikadsham, because I, Yahweh, am the one who makes them holy, who makes the Kohanim holy. All right. So these are beautiful summary sentences for this entire block of laws that we learned about, which essentially have to do with. I have to turn on the heat again. It's too hot. I have to wait 1 second, please. That's why I need an engineer. Anyone want to move to Katsrin and be my video and sound engineer? Okay. please. Alrighty, so right, this summarizes this entire block. Opening sentence, closing, opening summary sentence, closing summary sentence causes an envelope around the block of laws that we learned, which essentially have to do with treating with proper sanctity the laws regarding the items that are set aside, that are dedicated by the children of Israel to Yahweh. When an item is dedicated to Yahweh, Yahweh can't eat a hamburger and he can't drink a milkshake. He gives his gift to the Cohanim. The Cohanim take possession of it. They are human beings. They eat it. That is their salary. That is their lachmo, their bread and butter. They eat it, but they have to be careful. The children of Israel and the Kohanim have to be careful. In summary, let's review a little bit, and then we're gonna summarize. Okay. So any Kohen who is in a state of ritual impurity, who has the cooties, is not allowed to eat of these dedicated items. These items dedicated to Yahweh. Then we have all the different ways that a Kohen can enter into, or examples of different ways that a Kohen can enter into having the cooties, such as being tsarua, quote unquote leprous, having an irregular flow from his private part, coming in contact with a dead animal, a dead human being, and so on. Okay, if that does happen, then we have instructions how the Kohen can cleanse himself of that, and that's essentially by and then waiting for sundown. Why nothing more harsh than that? Because, and this is talking about touching someone who is in a state of cleanliness. If the Kohen has tzarat, if the Kohen is leprous, and he has to go through all of the details that we learned about in the chapter in Leviticus. Excuse me. But if he touches someone or something that is in a state of ritual impurity, he runs down, bathes himself, and then he's back in business, because he relies on for his payment, because he doesn't have a land inheritance within Israel. Anyone who's not a permanent part of the Kohen's household, such as a toshav, a green card holder, a sachir, a B2 visa, seasonal agricultural worker, is not allowed to eat of the dedicated items. But anyone who is a permanent part of the Kohen's household, including his sons, daughters, and manservants and maidservants, whether they were purchased by the Kohen or whether they were born in his household, in other words, they were the children of manservants, maidservants that he purchased, then they are allowed to eat of the holy of the dedicated items. Again, I think the assumption is that the male slaves would have been circumcised by the head of the household. And then we learned about this law of the daughter of a Kohen, a bat Kohen. When she's a little girl, she lives in her father's house, she's allowed to eat the dedicated items of the dedicated items. If she gets married to someone, to a zar, a stranger, but we said in the context of the Kohen, a zar means someone who's not a Kohen. She's no longer, at that point, when she's married to someone who's not a Kohen, she now takes on the status of her husband. If her husband's not a Kohen, she's not allowed to eat of the dedicated items. But if she's widowed or divorced and has no children, comes back to live in her father's house, as she did when she was a little girl, she now once again is allowed to eat of the dedicated items. We said that Leviticus chapter 22, 12, and 13. Oh my God, I have to drink some water. Is one of the clearest proofs, in my opinion, of the concept of the head of the household being the patrilineal head of the household, and proof of patrilineal descent by extension. And then we saw that someone who eats of the dedicated items by mistake, he's fine. Then he has to add a fifth onto the original amount. In other words, he returns 5/4 of the original amount to the Kohen, and that now becomes the dedicated item. And he doesn't have any punishment further beyond that. And then we saw the summary sentences, verses 15 and 16, which nicely wrap up and relate almost word for word, not quite, but relate back to the original sentences at the beginning of this block, verses 1 and 2. And that closes out this unit on these laws of the items dedicated to the Kohanim, the holy items, okay, the dedicated items. Here we have a pet. A pet is what we can call a Jewish chapter ending. So the chapter endings, chapter and verse, is a Christian invention worked out by, I can't remember his name, Stephen Covey or something like that, in the Middle Ages, a monk in the Middle Ages who worked out the chapter and verse. But the Masoretic texts on which all Hebrew versions, well, not all, 99% of the Hebrew, all of the regular Hebrew versions of the Tanakh that we use also have their own paragraph endings or section endings and chapter endings. And we see a peh that stands for Pasha Petucha, and that is essentially a chapter ending. It means that's it. We've come to the end of a unit of text or a block, a conceptual block in the Torah. And that's exactly what we've done here. Okay. Next time we'll continue in Leviticus chapter 22. We should be able to finish it off, hopefully. We'll start in verse 17. In fact, let me make a note of that before I forget. 1 second. Okay. Oh my God, I really need to drink water. I don't have it with me. It's okay. So we'll start next time in Leviticus chapter 2, verse 17, Be'ezrat Yahweh, with the help of Yahweh. But we're going to end it here for now. I hope you've enjoyed this Torah study. I personally find these technical chapters, I find Leviticus, I love Leviticus. I know people find it very technical. If it's not done correctly, it can be very boring. But as I've said many times, when you see how the whole system works together, it's brilliant. It's beautiful. It really brings out the wisdom of Yahweh, and it's at the same time very wise and subtle, and subtle is the wrong word, and complex, but at the same time very simple and straightforward, and makes a lot of logical sense, a lot of common sense. And I think the book of Leviticus, I don't want to say more than the other books of the Torah, but certainly in its own unique, special way, brings out the wisdom and the depth. And how can something be complex and simple at the same time? This is the beauty of Yahweh, okay? I always think about this in terms of, for instance, the seasons of the earth, on the earth, okay? The seasons are so complex. We have spring and summer and winter and fall, and, a million and one things go on in each season, and it's constantly in flux, and then it repeats the next year. How did Yahweh accomplish this? By a very simple act, quote unquote act, right? By a very simple happening. He just took the earth. I don't mean he literally took it with his hands, but he caused the earth to be on a tilt of 23.5 degrees off of the ecliptic, off of the plane of rotation. That little change is what causes the seasons. Okay? If he had just sit straight up and down, we'd have no season whatsoever. Okay? From the North Pole down to the South Pole, well, it would be a bit more complicated than having no seasons, but essentially, no, there would be no seasons. Depending on the latitude, it would be a little bit different. It's not the point. The point is that the seasons in a given latitude created by the simple act of Yahweh tilting the earth off its on an angle of 23.5 degrees with respect to its rotational axis. It's amazing how something so simple can create something so complex. That is the beauty of Yahweh. Simplicity and complexity at the same time. Okay? Can we do that? No. If we do something simple, it comes out simple and stupid. If we do something complex, it comes out complex and confusing. Unless we're really inspired, like, I don't know, Elon Musk, maybe with Tesla, right? There you have something that's both simple and complex at the same time. That's part of wisdom. That's part of genius. That's part of having a calling or a mission in life, to be able to somehow combine the simplicity and the complexity and come out and end up with something that is both at the same time. That really is the province of Yahweh, and we see it throughout. And I think Leviticus brings that out as much, if not more, than other parts of the Torah. At the same time, the simplicity of separating that which is ritually unclean from that which is holy, and at the other time, all of the details and the complexity of it. But it really is also simple and straightforward when you see it in its whole conception as different parts of the whole. Okay, with that being said, I'll throw it out for any questions and comments if there are. Last chance. Questions and comments, anybody? Oh my God, it's already 8:30. Wow, went more than I thought. No biggie. It's all good. All right, then I thank you for joining me at the World Alliance of Qara'im. I would really appreciate. I like I said at the beginning, I want to become a lot more assertive about donations. Okay, in the original announcement, you can find different ways to donate. I want to take the World Alliance of Qara'im to the next level. I have specific plans. I'm back in Israel. I'm here in Katsunin. I'm here in the north, and I have specific plans that I really want to start implementing. And I'm really relying on each and every one of you to be able to help out financially. This is not money that's going to my pocket, to buy fancy cars and stuff like that. This is money that is going to allow me to free up time and pay for resources that are absolutely essential to be able to take the World Alliance of Qara'im and Karaism, which is so important at this time, to the next level. So please look at the donation possibilities in the list I sent out, and please donate generously to the World Alliance of Qara'im. It's something that I've never, ever, in all the years I've been doing this, I don't like to raise it or push it. I'm not a money person. I'm an ideologue. I'm an idealist. But it's come to the point where if we don't have the money to properly do what we need to do, then we're just not going to be able to accomplish these amazing things that we can accomplish, and which are so important for the people of Israel at this point in time. Okay, so please, 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 donate to the World Alliance of Qara'im. Okay, like now, like go do it now before you forget. Okay, I'm sorry. I hate talking about money, but it has to be talked about because otherwise we just won't get where we need to get. All right. Thank you all for joining me in the study. B'ezrat Hashem, we'll see you again next week. And I wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov wherever you are in the world. We'll go out with some music, as we always do. And next week we'll pick it up in Leviticus chapter 22. Hope you enjoyed the study. Hope you found it interesting and worthwhile and fascinating, because that's what the Torah is. And B'ezrat Yahweh, we'll see you again next week.